I just valued every day. I wake up in the morning and I just wanted to be the guy that wanted to make a difference, have a big impact on the day. I was just a fierce competitor. Maybe sometimes I was over the top, maybe sometimes I knew when to overstep the mark. But my aggressive streak has always been mine.
Allan Donald, to me, had it all.
Nothing compared to Donald, you know, in the heat of battle, under pressure.
Allan Donald is right up there on the pantheon of great fast bowlers.
I think he was a genius of a bowler.
In many ways, you almost couldn't fail with him in your side.
It just came to him, you know, without too much effort.
When Allan came on to bowl and he had smelled blood, it was just wonderful theatre.
When he had the ball, you just had to watch.
In his pump, he was as good as any of them.
He just was a superb, great fast bowler, simple.
I think our whole family had a love for the game.
My uncle and my brother and used to cut a strip in my granny and granddad's backyard and used to play test matches there at the back.
And little did we know what a superstar he was going to become. The only way I could actually get him off that pitch was if by some accident we would break a window. And we often broke windows, and that stopped the game until my father got home.
It was during this time, growing up in the heart of South Africa's Free State, that Donald became friends with another Bloemfontein schoolboy, one who would go on to captain South Africa.
Frans and Allan were actually the same class. Hansie was a bit younger.
When he left me, then he would phone Hansie, and he'd spend days with the Cronjes.
Yeah, we were brothers, and I used to be dropped off there on a weekend.
They played for Grey Primary, and I remember this blonde-headed fast bowler.
They stayed quite close to the school, and Allan often went there in the afternoons, and they played cricket on the lawn.
The effect that Evie and Frans and Hansie had on me was quite considerable.
Another early influence was Johan Volstead.
I remember playing for Grey College under-13 A-side, and he was the under-19 coach, and came across one day at Grey College at the nets and spotted me, and immediately took me aside, took me under his wing.
I was very keen to be coached. He had a natural feel for the game, but he also wanted to know more all the time.
As a child, you're looking for some sort of leadership, and a man to sort of, or a guy, or a coach, or a teacher in his case, looking for some guidance, and he was that man, and he really was fantastic.
He did primary schooling here 7 years, and then he went to technical high school.
Upon leaving Louis Botha Technical High School, Donald was enlisted to military service.
In '87, I remember so well, Allan was in the army. I was president of the union, and Allan wasn't fond of the army. And then he came to me and he said to me, he wants to go overseas. I said to him, Allan, finish your army training first, then you can go. He said, no, I want to go now. That was 1987. And I found Ali Bacher, Dr. Ali Bacher.
I had a very close relationship with David Brown from Warwickshire.
He came over on an exchange situation we had with South Africa, set up between Warwickshire and the South African Cricket Board, Ali Bacher.
We came to understanding that we would send over once a year our most promising cricketer, and Allan was one of the players that we sent across to David Brown.
His first session was in the indoor school, and it was wet and cold outside, so we had to go indoors for practice. And he was bowling at Dennis Amos.
Well, Dennis was on his last legs at that stage, and I hope he forgives me when I say that.
He was very quick, and when you're in your 40-odd at the end of your career, that's something that you'd rather not have.
And I bowled him a really good short ball that sort of just went there, and it gloved him, and he walked out the net, and I thought, oh my word, what have I done?
Then after about 15 minutes, Dennis said, Andy, you better come in here, I've had enough of this.
Well, I was never into swearing very much, so I'm not quite sure that I might have told him where he should be bowling or should be bowling against other people instead of me.
And he was bowling so fast. It's a quick surface in the indoor school. He was bowling at the speed of light.
He said, this is fantastic what you're going to bring, you know, this is good pace. I want you to do it out there against the opposition.
We were all telling the coach, David Brown, to say, well, we've got to sign this guy, and within a couple of days it was all done, you know. I mean, he was just, you know, very special.
That was my break. So David, when he came with this offer, I just said, I don't care, you know, I'd love to be there, and that was the start of a very, very long relationship with a great club.
I remember when I saw him off at the airport, he said to me, Uncle Des, must I really go? And I said to him, you're climbing on this plane and you're going.
I went there and I couldn't speak a word of English. That was my biggest challenge.
Funny enough, when he came back in September that year, the first thing I noticed was his English accent of Allan Donald.
He was bubbly, he was spontaneous, he was speaking English, he was no longer an introvert, and yeah, that was a turning point in his career.
Allan never looked back after that.
He settled into life in Birmingham very well. He met his wife there. He settled in very quickly.
After that settling in period, Donald helped Warwickshire to their first trophy in 9 years when they overcame Middlesex in the 1989 NatWest final.
I've always heard about Lords and what a big occasion it is. Beating Worcester that year at Edgbaston in the semi-final and ultimately playing against Middlesex in a magnificent final. It was such a nerve-wracking experience.
When he clicked, you know, it was just, he was almost unplayable. And it was big for the club. It was the first time that we'd won anything in a long time.
Winning a one-day trophy there was just absolutely outrageous. I think that was the start of Warwickshire's march to a lot of trophies, especially in the early to late 90s.
Allan was right there kicking it all off for us.
Whilst Donald was achieving his dreams at a domestic level, changes were also afoot on the international stage. Since 1970, South Africa had been banned from competing internationally due to the apartheid regime in the country. Following Nelson Mandela's release from prison in 1990, the apartheid system was being slowly dismantled.
Well, I think the greatest moment I've had in a long history, which I've been privileged to be part of, South African cricket, was the unification of South African cricket in 1991.
In November of that year, South Africa played their first official international cricket match for 21 years.
I think it was just a great time in world sport, that finally politics had got its nose out of it, and these wonderful South African sports people, and in our sport of cricket, the cricketers, could come out and play world cricket again.
When we got back into international cricket, I took the South African team over to India, in Calcutta, and there were 100,000 people at the ground. You just can't believe that, you know, that you could have this many people at a stadium watching.
And I thought, well, if that's international cricket, I want more of this. And I wanted to lock the door, and I wanted to be part of a South African team for years to come.
We had missed so many great players, and they had missed the opportunity to play Test cricket during apartheid years. It was an absolute shame.
3 months on from their reintroduction to world cricket, the Proteas were invited to compete at the 1992 World Cup, where their first match was to be against joint hosts Australia.
First game in Sydney in the World Cup. Jeff Marsh faced the first over, I think there was a little bit of controversy in that first ball.
I bowled to Jeff Marsh, and he just nicked the cover off this thing, and I'm just thinking, this is unreal.
A sense of total disbelief, because it was one of those things that was so obvious that, I mean, there was just a celebration. It wasn't even an appeal.
I said to the umpire, I said, did he not nick that? Are you sure he didn't? He said, no, I never saw a deflection. I never heard a nick.
When it was turned down, the thinking from Allan was, maybe it's me. Maybe it's really me. Maybe I imagined it.
And I looked on the big screen, and he was staring, looking behind his shoulder, over his shoulder, and he saw it. And he just said, I apologise for that. You know, so, but what a game, you know. We won by 9 wickets, and we were off in the World Cup.
In their semi-final clash against England, the South Africans were eliminated due to a rain-interrupted match, which left them requiring a miracle off the final ball to progress. They had, however, announced themselves on the world stage and were greeted as heroes on their return to Johannesburg.
Well, you know, for the first time in my cricket career, I felt like a genuine South African again. And it's nice to come home feeling like a true South African sportsman after so many years.
Things weren't all plain sailing, though, and Donald had seen his overseas player status threatened by Warwickshire's signing of Australian batsman Tom Moody.
I was captain when we had 2 overseas players. We had Tom and Allan, and we had to make a choice at the end of the season as to who was going to be our guy for next year.
We had a difficult decision to make about Tom Moody or Allan Donald.
In my view, fast bowlers win you more matches, and they win matches quicker in all types of the game. And thankfully, I got my way as captain, and I respect everybody for supporting me at that time in keeping Allan.
So we kept AD, and that was to prove a really good decision as well for us.
He had also ironed out the inconsistencies that had been with him from his younger days.
He was really wild and woolly. You're a bit kind of slightly worrying facing him in those early days because he wasn't quite sure where the ball was going.
You know, his line, for example, was one thing that maybe early on he'd bowl it very fast, but it would be a bit leg side, bit offside, sprayed around a bit.
That was in the early part of his career, and he obviously improved and became a very, very high-class performer.
And obviously, as he became a better bowler, he just slightly cut down on his pace a little, but was much more accurate and controlled, but just occasionally could really ramp it up as well.
He got stronger, and you know, he kept just relentlessly bowling fast all through the day, and that was his ability that a lot of bowlers don't have. He was on the money all day.
We built up a magnificent squad over the years. Andy Lloyd being captain, and a great captain, then followed by Dermot Reeve, who was just magnificent. So being part of that era was truly amazing.
He was an incredible bowler, obviously. He was a huge character within the dressing room.
You know, we were a good side, but he was the focal point of our attack.
And he, as a player, made you feel as a batsman that whatever score we got when we played for Warwickshire, whether we got 180, 480, Allan Donald would get the better of the opposition and we'd be in a better position for it.
With his technique now honed to perfection, he took on the world's elite batsmen.
I think it's the one test that I will never forget was against India when he bowled Sachin Tendulkar with a brilliant inducker.
I will never forget the ball for the rest of my life. Just ridiculous.
As a frontline bowler, you're always trying to target their best players. So that was a great feeling when that off stump went cartwheeling out the ground.
It was a phenomenal piece of bowling, and the look on Sachin Tendulkar's face was sort of slightly of shock.
I always cherished certain individuals that you enjoy knocking those guys over because they don't come easily.
Some of the spells he bowled, you know, you were fearful of him. He was looking to hit you at times.
He just delivered that ball in such an angry way. A length, just short of a length, often cutting back at you, and then the bouncer past the batsman's nose.
And there was an intimidation factor that there always is with fast bowling.
In latter years, I went out to South Africa with the boys on a pre-season tour, and Allan Donald, was in the nets, and somebody said, Dan, take a bat, have a little bat. And Allan Donald said, I'll bowl at you. And I said, no way, I don't think you can bowl slow.
He was a very clever bowler as well. He worked out ways of getting you out. He would set you up. He would swing the ball, and like I say, swinging the ball at pace was a deadly combination.
When Allan was on fire, it just lifted the whole energy of the team, and that was able to, he was able to single-handedly sweep them up into this momentum of, energy and frenzy.
One such occasion was during the 4th Test against England at Trent Bridge in 1998. Leading 1-0 with 2 tests to play, the South Africans were aware of the threat posed by England's famously stoic opening batsman.
I remember plotting against Michael Atherton back in the 90s, and the conversation was going round and around in the South African strategy meeting, how are we going to bowl to Atherton?
We all discussed this technical ability and this, where we should be bowling, where his feet should be, and where we want him to be, how we're going to suffocate him in the crease.
Bob Woolm had a theory, and Hansie had a theory, and Craig Matthews had a theory, and Brian McMillan did. And eventually it was going round and round, and someone said, hang on guys, why don't we ask Allan, because he's actually the guy who needs to bowl to him.
And Bob said to me, AD, what do you think?
Everyone looked at him, and he had a sip of his beer in the team meeting those days, and he said,
well, why don't you just hit him on the head and call him a, I think, Paddy would have told you, but, and everyone burst out laughing. What was all this analysing about? And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it was a Sunday evening, big audience on telly, full house, just a couple of games to go, so it was absolutely set up. And there you had it, a kind of duel that you often get in a test match, batsman, bowler.
It was a quite feisty series, to be honest, as well. There was a lot of umpiring controversy. They felt they'd had a lot of bad decisions. We felt we'd had some bad decisions, and there was a bit of tension building between the sides.
The game was meandering a little bit, was in the balance a bit, and I waved to Hansie. I said, listen, I think I must go have a go from this end, but you've got to trust me on this one. I've got to just give me the feel that I want. I'm going to go aggressive here.
And Donald got more out of that flat pitch than any bowler.
I just felt good, and it's one of those moments where you just feel, wow, this is coming out nicely, and it paces up, and the rhythm's good, and there's shape on the ball.
He suddenly got it through. He bent his back as much as he could. He steamed in. And it started with the Atherton incident.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. When you talk about duels that you see happening, that was a duel of note, where Atherton got away with that nick behind.
Punched it hard, and it was a great catch by Mark Boucher. Yeah, it took pace off it, and he had to dive to his right. Magnificent catch.
As it happened, I had an enormous slice of luck when I wasn't given out, caught behind off my glove.
So Atherton just leant on his bat, said bad luck.
Of course, Athers was never going to walk for that, and you're never going to blame people for not walking.
Donald was sort of swearing at Atherton's in Afrikaans to start with.
It was just a horrible decision that gone wrong.
Then he mouthed something to him in English, and Athers was the sort just to smirk back like he did, that annoying sort of Cambridge smirk that Atherton has, that really wound Donald up even more.
For about 45 minutes, he bowled ferociously quick, fantastic to watch.
I know that Nasser Hussain was standing on the non-strikers end for quite some time, and there was a lot of verbals going around.
I was just happy standing on my bat saying, I'll take Pollock, you bowling at 80 mile an hour, you take Donald bowling at 95 mile an hour. And then unfortunately I got up Donald's end and I gloved one to Boucher.
Things were really tense, and Boucher, he took everything during that series, and then he dropped that catch.
Donald went absolutely ballistic. I mean, I thought his head was going to explode.
I still remember just yelling out as loud as I possibly could.
To be fair to Donald, at the end of the over, he went down, he went back to Boucher and apologised, but it was high-tension stuff out there.
It was unbelievable theatre. Here you had the fiercest fast bowler in the world bowling to, at the time, one of the mentally the most toughest batsmen in the world.
It was two men at the peak of their game, two stubborn men, two proud men. Atherton was going nowhere. Donald knew that a great injustice had been done, and it fired him up even more.
It was great theatre, exactly the small kind of period of play that you play for.
That 45 minutes was the best 45 minutes I've had on a cricket field with anybody, one-on-one. It was just awesome.
Test cricket at its best.
It was just one of those great sporting moments that, when you mention it, I mean, I can see everything, I can feel the experience that I had back then just unfolding. It was one of those beautiful, and that's why we love sport, it's for those moments.
Atherton ultimately led England to victory, but the unforgettable duel ensured a mutual respect between batsman and bowler.
Well, he's a great fast bowler, and it's always a challenge facing him with a new ball. Obviously, it was a key part of our second innings. You know, there's a lot been written in the papers about the duel yesterday, but one thing's for sure, you know, at the end of the game, we'll both have a drink. You know, we're good mates.
He actually came and brought 6 beers up to our change room, or down, shall I say, and he just said, and he brought his right glove, which had a massive red mark on it. And it was my benefit year the next year, and he said, "Al, I think we need to have a beer." Me and him have had a great friendship over the years since then, and that's the way I think the sport should be played.
The following year, South Africa faced old foes England again. But with the cricket world anticipating another fierce scrap between Atherton and Donald, the fast bowler was struggling.
I went into that test match convinced that I was absolutely out of form, and I was really nervous about that first day, because the day before I went downstairs, I didn't feel good. The morning of the test match, I said to Bob Wilmer and to Hansie, I said, "Listen guys, I don't feel in good nick." And Hansie said, "Listen, I know you're gonna take 5 wickets in this game," and yeah, whatever. It just boomeranged. It swung so much, and I knocked over Atherton.
It was, again, one of those sort of iconic scoreboard moments, you know, 2 for 4. England, 2 for 4. Is that 4 for 2 or 2 for 4? But it was.
I looked up at the scoreboard, and it was ridiculous. Thank goodness we bowled first, because it swung, it seamed, it carried at pace.
Having bowled his nemesis for a duck, Donald, together with fellow fast bowler Sean Pollock, went on to destroy the England batting order.
That absolutely symbolised the partnership, and Allan Donald making all the noise up front, chopping people's heads off, and Pollock just mopping up behind him.
The more I took wickets, the more my confidence built up, and I was probably back at my best.
That was really, really classic cricket on a wicket that was pretty spicy, pretty green and hopeful.
I think I took 6 and 5 and ended up 11 in the game, and it was a very special test match.
By now, Donald was routinely making South African cricket history. In 1997, he overtook the legendary Hugh Tayfield as the Proteas' highest wicket-taker in test matches, with this wicket in Melbourne. Less than 3 years later, and Donald had claimed his 300th victim in test cricket, and recognition had also arrived from outside the sporting world.
I heard 2 days before that Mr. Mandela was going to hand over the Presidential Sports Awards to various guys and ladies in different sports, and I just said I'm not missing that for the world, especially him handing it over. I've got a very big picture in my bar in Cape Town of that particular night where he was handing the medal over, and it was a fantastic event. He's the president of your country, and he's a man that's been through a lot. But when he walks up to you and say, you know, what's Bloem like? You know, I mean, this guy should not be knowing where I'm from.
In 2004, White Lightning announced his retirement from the sport he had served so well.
He is one of the greatest fast bowlers this country's produced. But what I like so much about Allan Donald, his passion and love in playing for South Africa was profound.
He epitomised the South African attitude, you know, aggressive on the field, want to win, play the game in the right manner.
He always responded. He was a showman, and he did enjoy performing to the gallery, much as he may say that that wasn't his aim. He did, he enjoyed it.
He's just such a nice man, he's such a gentle, soft-spoken guy, and yet on the field he was just had that killer instinct.
I respected the game a great deal. I respected who I played against and who I played with, and I say that with great humility, is that was the person I think I was.
The pride that we had in Allan, not because only of his ability as a cricketer, but as a person, his whole mannerism, that he could be humble in all his achievements.
He's such a nice man still today. He's a good father and a good husband.
He connected with the wide spectrum. He was this sort of iconic figure. Allan was a role model for everybody.
I respected every opponent that I played against and played with, and that's what I'd like to be remembered with.